Hey everyone, Jessica Stern, Senior Manager for Local Arts and Business Partnerships here at Americans for the Arts. Welcome to the first session of part 3 of the How to Partner with Your Chamber of Commerce series, entitled Politics, Policy, and Resource Distribution. We have multiple resources available for you on this activity page to view in tandem with this recording. Access to the toolkit under the Toolkit tab, the transcript for this video under the Transcript tab, and additional resources are under the Resources tab. Email us at artsusa.org should you need any assistance. I am pleased to welcome our 3 presenters from Monroe, Louisiana. Kelsey McCrary is the Chief Economic and Cultural Development Officer with the City of Monroe. Roy Heatherly is the President and CEO of the Monroe Chamber of Commerce. And Chris Kelly is the Executive Director of the West Monroe and West Washita Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all so much for joining us. Today, we're going to have a moderated conversation, and so I'll just start by asking you each to introduce yourselves, tell us who your primary constituency is, and then tell us a little bit about your top priorities for the conversation, and then we'll jump in.
Am I first?
Ladies
Okay.
first.
My name is Kelsey McCrary, and like Jessica said, my title is really long, but I'm the Chief Economic and Cultural Development Officer for the City of Monroe. The City of Monroe actually only has about 47 to 50,000 people inside of its city limits, but we serve an area of 11 parishes or counties. So our MSA area is rather large for the amount of utilities and services and industries and quality of life amenities that we offer to the full region. And so one thing that Mayor Friday Ellis really wanted to focus on was collaboration and unity amongst all sectors of our society, and some of that being within the creative and the business sector as well. And so these 2 gentlemen to my left, your right, however it looks on your screen, have been huge partners for us since coming into office a little over 2 years ago. I've been with the mayor about a year. And my background is predominantly in government relations and arts administration. So this is sort of a sweet spot for us as we try to pursue economic vitality for an area that has historically been pretty suppressed, and but also an area that has one of the coolest cultures that you'll ever come across if you are lucky enough.
Oh, well, hi, I'm Chris Kelly with the West Monroe West Washita Chamber of Commerce. And so I'm proud to be here. You know, I laughingly say all the time, people say West Monroe, we focus a lot on the parish, and really we lead our region. And so increasing collaboration between all of those organizations that are in our community, but also what faces outwardly. And for us, the arts and music and the culture that we have in North Louisiana that's so special is how we speak to quality of life. You know, when we're trying to recruit a business into this area, it's quite easy once we get their ear. Unfortunately, we've worked against ourselves for a number of years and not really told and owned our story. And so, telling the story of our community, telling it well, and owning that narrative truly is important to us, because when you talk about economic development, you're really talking about taking advantage of the culture and the people that are here. That can't happen without the arts. The reason that we are so unique in Northeast Louisiana, especially post-Katrina, is because of the arts. And we have vibrant institutions that support it, both nonprofits and universities throughout. So I'm excited to be part of this conversation. Roy.
Well, thank you, Chris. I'm very excited to be part of the conversation. My name is Roy Heatherly. I'm president of the Monroe Chamber of Commerce. And really, we serve, I serve like Chris and like Kelsey, we serve the entire region. It's not about the Monroe Chamber, it's not about the West Monroe Chamber, it's not about the city of Monroe. We all grow together. Kelsey hit on the key word, which is collaboration. And we've worked very hard as a team to collaborate to grow. And I think Chris really summed it up as well, too. If we are going to grow our community, and there's so many great things happening in Monroe, West Monroe, Washita Parish, Northeast Louisiana, we're on fire right now. And this is our time, and we're very excited. But like Chris said, it gets down to quality of life. And we think we have the best quality of life in the world. And it's taken us a while to figure out how to work together to drive that home. But man, we're coming. The train has left the station, and we're rolling.
That's fantastic. So this session is really designed to start to think about the key relationships and the trust that can exist between local arts agencies, municipal government, and chambers of commerce. And so I want to start us off by asking, if one of you happened to leave how does the momentum continue to go forward? How are you all preparing for long-term partnerships and collaborations? Because so often, all the time, key leaders, whether they're elected officials or civic leaders, they do leave. And so how do you keep your momentum going and prepare for the future?
I think from the city's perspective, we've entered into a couple of new partnerships, one of which is with the Americans for the Arts in the Arts and Economic Prosperity Study cohort that we're in. I think it's AEP 6. And so we are trying to look at policy. I've said quite frequently in the last couple of years of my career that policy is power. And so we've entered into a music strategy study with a group called Sound Diplomacy, looking at noise ordinances and zoning and, how friendly are we to venues? What type of contractual obligations do musicians enter into? So trying to understand from a policy perspective more about the creative economy and what our role is as government, which is a pretty nerdy niche. But it's also super cool because that means that it will hopefully outlive us. But besides that infrastructural side, I think also just the relational side, we inherited a lot of relationships, and also, as Uncle Roy says, we inherited a lot of apathy. And so I think if that can be passed down, then the opposite can also be, more of a tradition bearing perspective there. And so I think what we're trying to do is say there is no other alternative than for the city and the arts community and the business community to work together. That's it. And so I think just like we inherited the opposite, I think we're setting the standard for the folks that come after us, that this is the way that we do things. And so I think I hate this phrase, but just like when you're looking for a job, there are hard skills and soft skills. And so I think looking at the hard skills side of things with the policy and with the procedures and the process, but I think looking at the more soft skills side, which in my opinion are the most important of those relationships, and almost just the precedent, another P word, that's set forth for whatever constituents take these jobs, or business leaders or community leaders, that this is the way things are done, that they're not done in silos, and that they are done together.
And I'll add to that so Chris and I have a couple of opportunities here. One, we've worked very closely over the last year, and by working closely, we've brought our boards onto it. And by strategically building a board that gets the mission, and the mission is this bigger picture that we're talking about, then if I'm not here, the board picks up, they hire correctly in terms of replacing me, and we move forward with it. And that's what we've tried to do. We have an executive team that talks all the time with his executive team, and that has really helped too, because as Kelsey said, we're changing the conversation. We're changing the conversation into about the knocking apathy down and about our growth and everything.
It's almost like instead of a why, it's a why not.
Yes.
Mentality.
What I think is really cool that's happening in the last couple of years, and let's back up and remember that all of us are relatively new to our roles. So you have both in time, we have a temporal dynamic that she came on, we both assumed two roles. Roy came from out of town, I came from academia back over. So it's different. But also we get to always use the excuse, or I get to all the time, of COVID. It doesn't matter what you used to do before. It doesn't work anymore because of COVID. It's COVID's fault. We can't have those same conversation anymore. So it's this beautiful coalescence of three things happening at the same time. I have infinite trust in Roy. I don't, and he and I both don't need our name on things. No. It's not a legacy project. It's moving the community forward.
It's about the people.
If somebody needs to stand at the microphone and get credit for whatever the thing is, great. If not, we're going to fill the void and move the conversation forward.
That's right.
And we have two mayors that are similar in that too. So when you ask that question about how are you looking for the legacy, I would say, of course, she's saying policy. We're setting the stage with an internal dimension of this is what the standard is, but also I'm not really looking that far into the future. I just want to keep nudging the conversation along in time. I think the danger sometimes of having procedural, like here's the next step, who's going to take over after, assumes that they have the skills for what's coming in 6 months from now. So being humble enough to say that, hey, if I'm not the right guy for it, Roy can step in, or Kelsey, or whoever else. That's important, and it's a little bit rare to have people that. I know that if Kelsey calls and says, we just need this, and I'll promise you I'll fill you in later, I'm gonna sign the
There's-
letter.
there's
That's right.
trust.
There's a level of trust there that's been developed outside of this working relationship.
And I can't emphasize enough here, two things. One, Kelsey mentioned apathy. There is a sense of pride here, and we've lit a fire. I mean, I don't know if that's the right word, but everywhere from far west Washita Parish to East Washita, Northeast Louisiana, people are genuinely excited about what's going on here. And so we just need to step back and let them write the story, as Chris was talking about. And the other thing that I think we need to talk about is the diversity of everybody coming to the table right now, because that's what makes us strong. That's what grows our arts. That's what brings the new ideas and the energy, because everybody is welcome at the table now. And that's really, I think, a cool thing that people are seeing here. And it just, it's really, Kelsey coordinated through Nirali Patel, this mural project on some buildings that are being renovated downtown, and there's a whole story behind those buildings too. But there's 8 murals that she put a call out to local artists, and we got to participate in that. But the murals are so cool because they tell a story. Each one individually tells a story, but collectively they say who we are. And there was such a diverse group of artists, young, old, new. It just is great. It's just really cool. So, yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, like, because I want to touch on that a little bit later, but from a tactical perspective, apparently I'm a big fan of alliteration today, but we talked about a couple things that I want to bring up. The media and how we leverage media between our 3 respective institutions and beyond. The members, which Chris and Roy both talked about with their boards, but also I think we jokingly use the word mementos. Like, what are you doing with your ceremonies? What are you doing with your awards to your industries? What are you doing to your awards to your business people, like your top 20 under 40, your top 40 over 60, whatever that may be. And exactly. And I think one thing we say a lot to each other is, if it's important, it'll be important.
Yeah.
And so I think that this is just finally the time where really this kind of change is hard. It's not complicated. And I think that we try to reverse that in our minds. But if you look at it from like, okay, simplify it. What can we do in our media and how we talk? The mayor says that all the time. Before you change hearts and minds, you have to change hearts and mouths. And so how do we talk about our work? How do we talk about each other? How do we talk about this place? And then I think in your membership base, I mean, it's if you can't explain to someone why they need to be a member of the chamber, if you can explain to someone why they should be in your community, that's where you should start. But then also I think in your mementos, in your ceremonies, and in your, traditions, and in the things that you're building in your community, who is involved? Why are they involved? How are they involved? And some of that stuff feels, I guess, silly or too complicated for people, but it's not, it's just hard. And that almost makes it easy, because if you have people that you trust, you can sit down and say, why have we done it this way? I mean, we have a situation in town right now where it's really a small thing in the grand scheme of things. It's just occurred habitually for like 20 years. And it's an overlap in events for audiences. And so because we trust each other, we can simply say, why is that event on that night? How can we integrate the 2 audiences together? Because the audiences really one serves business community and one really serves the arts community. But we're saying that they're part of that larger economy and they're the same. They touch each other in ways that are necessary for them both to thrive. And so I think that for me is like the tactical side of what any community can step back and say, because some of them may struggle with some of the things we have, especially if they're a deep Delta community. Some of them may not, but everybody can look at those almost like verticals of work and say, how can we, push this forward and make this better?
That's a great segue. And I want to bring up something that, Roy, you mentioned about bringing people to the table. And in terms of changing the narrative, we've talked about media and celebrating and mementos. Roy, I know you've done a lot of work with diversifying the committees in the chamber. And I was wondering if you could talk about that, and then how each of you could talk about what that means in terms of changing this narrative towards a trusting community that is built on quality of place.
Absolutely. One of the first conversations I had with Mayor Ellis was about diversifying our board, and what does that look like when we started looking at diversifying the board? Well, we looked at age, we looked at gender, we looked at race, we looked at all of those things, but a lot of it's funny, we diversified, but everybody had that same goal. When we sat down and talked to that board, they all wanted this community to thrive. And so that was our first step is we began to build a board that not only reflected the community. One of the first things that I did when I took over was I noticed that we were meeting at the same place month in, month out, and they were a little bit boring. So I reached out to Barry. They were. I mean, a board meeting is a board meeting.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to Barry Stevens, who's over the Northeast Louisiana Arts Council, and I said, Barry, would you make a presentation to our board, and let's do it at the Strauss Theater. So our board went to the Strauss
I
Theater.
forgot about that. That was so fun.
We sat at the Strauss Theater, and Barry made a presentation on why the arts are important to their businesses. And so again, going back to what Kelsey said, relationships and trust.
Mhm. And I want to speak a little bit to just both of them and the work that has spun out of the diversification of the members, because he listed some things that are always on a checkbox of diversification. But one thing that I think we have sold ourselves short on and not really realized the value of is diversification of thought
Yes.
and of background. Because I've said it before and I'll say it again, there are people on that chamber board that aren't typical chamber board members for both of them.
Yeah.
And what that's led to is something like that, where we're meeting at the 90+ historic theater in our community that served, gosh, thousands and thousands of kids, adults, everybody in between. We are, doing things with education that, why is the chamber involved in that? Because that's your workforce development pipeline.
Right.
And so I think some of that stuff, as the people who have been at the table have come from such a much more broad expanse of thought and thought leadership and subject matter expertise, all of that has flowed into the chambers being more creative, literally, in how they're going about their work, and the committees are driving it. And I think that's been the cool thing too, is to watch and see that the amount of more classically defined creative people being involved in both chambers. Chris himself, comes from an arts background, helps run a museum in a super rural community about 30 minutes south of Monroe. Uncle Roy's a former newspaper man, and he's not going to tell you that, but, running that newsroom and being in that environment, that more humanities focused environment, directly affects the way that their leadership, changes the chamber.
I'm going to give a shout out to Chris, if I could, for just a minute, because when we took over, basically our chambers were technically rivals, but we've extended out the olive branch to each other, and we work very closely on trying to build that collaboration. But
it comes real quick. It comes from when leadership doesn't reflect the community. Y'all's community never saw themselves as rivals, and so they simply embraced what was already, happening in the community.
But Kelsey just hit on something too, that he has this genuine love for the arts. He was on the theater board. He's got this art museum down in like she said, a rural area, Columbia, Louisiana. You wouldn't expect to have the arts that they have down there, this theater and everything.
Cool.
And he has driven that, and he really has brought to the table through his board and his membership, a love for the arts and why that benefits their business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is really something that we can't undersell in all of this.
Well, the concern thank you. And also the concern that I always have is, I'm 40-ish. And then the next, yes, we're all 40-ish. And then in the next demographic box down, volunteerism is different.
Yes.
And in the next demographic box down, it's very different.
Mm-hmm.
And what keeps some of these institutions that we love, like a chamber of commerce, relevant? What keeps a rural museum relevant? What keeps a local theater that's doing its 92nd season relevant is that it's providing some kind of skills on the way to a career path somewhere else. Diversifying your knowledge so that you can, get there. The biggest, recruitment tool that we have a lot of times is the diversity of what's going on in our community.
Mm-hmm.
So our events calendars, if you look at them, there's not a night that we have free, bad or good.
Yeah.
And I try to go to maybe 20% of the stuff that's in town, and I'm never home. That's cool in the sense that, there's always a concert, there's always something to do, there's always live theater, there's always someone creating a new space to energize yourself and feel both at home, but engaged with the community. And so I have to give a shout out to people that are creating things like the crawl,
Right.
That's really unique for the size town we have. We have hundreds of people coming to an assortment of venues, and they all sort of do their own thing, but it coalesces into a night, and it's this week. We have people creating a holiday music soundtrack to give back to kids, and we're premiering it, and the chamber is buying, 350 copies of it so that we can give it away as a Christmas card, and on and on and on. It's collaboration in a space that I don't think would be anything else, to try to give a little bit of leadership, to kind of give a little bit of an example and engage a younger group of volunteers, because I really have concerns about what comes next. Because if apathy is where we're going, then something like that streetlight's always been out is never going to get fixed. Something as simple as driving around your community and noting what streetlights are out makes a change. Now we have music on actually a couple streets over in evening times. Families are getting out because their street is relit again. It brings culture back when things like businesses get involved in the community and set an example.
Yeah, like one cannot exist without the other.
One cannot exist
It can't.
without the other.
I think there's another piece to all of this too. We talk about recruitment of industry in quality of life, but I think it's the retention of talent here just as much. And that starts with children. And we have a vibrant program through the Arts for Kids. And it complements what we're beginning to do with technology for kids and what's going on with that. And I think that is really, really critical as these children grow up to be our future workforce, that they want to stay in our community, that we're building that place for them to stay. And I think that, I don't think we should ever undersell that as well.
This gets a little bit to a sense of urgency that I know we've talked about in civic leadership, and thinking about combating that apathy and really creating that sense of culture in place. And I'm wondering if you all can just talk about the role of arts partners and chambers of commerce in having a sense of urgency. And you all are laughing, so I'm really looking forward to your response.
I think that they know I feel strongly about this, and I believe you do now as well, Jessica, that, a lot of times when artists or creative people walk into a room, it's with the feeling that they shouldn't be there, or that they don't have as much to contribute, or they don't, and it's because they don't have a societally clearly defined role, like a lawyer, a banker, a teacher, a healthcare professional. And I think the opposite of that, kind of that whole question of not why, but why not, that concept comes to bear fruit here as well, of that is the point, that your role is not that clearly defined, which is why you are so necessary. And so I think my life goal at this point in my life is to convince them to not apologize for that, and to bear witness to the point of them being in the room and at the table, is to be able to guide some of these really complicated things that are occurring in our world, things that are complicated and not just hard, but also to give credence and to build trust. I think you said that, Jessica, build trust where there isn't any, because arts and culture has a very unique ability to do that. I mean, we all know this, preaching to the choir, about how it, cross-cultural boundaries and all, even languages and all kinds of things that keep people apart. Arts and culture dissolves that. And so I think until the artists are elevated as, people who have an equitable stake in the economy, in government, in the business world, in community engagement and community building, I don't think we're really going to really see the change that they could affect. And so I think that's my sense of urgency, is that, only artists can do certain things. And I think there's a beauty in that. And there's an expertise in that we haven't really allowed them to claim. And so if we are allowing our citizens to claim ownership of that, whether it's making space or speaking up at a chamber meeting, or, anything as small or as grand as you could imagine it, that for me is what the urgency is about, is, we don't have any time to lose. That's how I feel. And it's like, even though that mural project was amazing, and I've said this to them, I crafted the dang project and I was shocked at how well it turned out. And I shouldn't have been. That's my world. But that goes to show, if I even feel that way, how much more legwork is there to be done with the general populace. The trust that was there in that project occurs because I am from that sphere of living, right? Like, I know so-and-so, and I know how they can paint, and I know what they can execute, and I know what their style is, and I know how the brain works. But it's like, if I'm somebody who just owns a business and I want to paint this wall as a mural, I don't have that level of trust with anybody. And so even on that, shallow level of example, it's like, how can we break open that barrier and allow them to be, what they need to be in our community? That's my soapbox.
Well, but I think also, so I have a clock on my wall, and when I started my relationship, with this rural museum, we talked about the Shepherds, I put 10 years on the clock. And so I've got a certain amount of time left to make it freestanding and get
Sustainable.
people there in a sustainable way again. You know, for example, we talked about Strauss Theater, you know, we had a $200,000 spare, you know, that we needed a roof and we needed all these things. And all of a sudden you have a board that feels petrified of that goal, when in reality, we met it, exceeded it, and moved on to the next, whatever the catastrophe is. But
And learned a new set of skills along the way.
learned a new set of skills. But what was really cool and made that happen was engaging a whole different sector.
That's right. That's right.
And so when we put out an all call and needed money to come in for almost all those nonprofits, it's always the arts community.
Yes.
That steps up.
That's right.
It's always the artists that probably can't afford to give away their
That's
work,
right.
that doesn't even really value their time in that piece.
That's right.
You know, like I have a friend, Heather. I feel compulsive to buy almost everything she ever posts on Facebook because she undervalues herself tremendously. And I always ask her, well, how much paint do you have?
I made
in that
somebody
paint?
uncomfortable at a maker's market on Friday because she does weavings
Yeah.
and they're so cheap. And like at one point I thought her husband was like gonna step in and tell me to chill because I was like, this is ridiculous. You know, like I was like physically angry. I was like, I'm paying you for 3 and buying 1. I was like, this is insane. And she was like, well, I just don't know. And I was like, how will you know if you don't add a 0? You know, it was crazy. Anyway, keep going.
No, but that's a perfect example of, you know, artists undervaluing their own work product, but it's every time we do a call to the community, whether it's the Arts Council doing an art event right now, whether it's when you have a gala and you'll have an event, you know, every organization that we're involved in, the arts community steps up in a disproportionate way.
Yeah.
They do.
And so what I see over and over again is the people that probably need us to give voice back to them.
Yeah.
Probably are resistant to it because they're shy in a way that, oh, I don't deserve that.
Well, I
Who
think
do I? Don't necessarily.
Y'all know this is also a passion of mine. It's lack of understanding of the verbiage.
Yes.
They don't know the words to demand value, or they don't know the vocabulary that will allow them to have those kinds of conversations. And I think that's also where the business sector can be so valuable in explaining value of the cultural community. You know, we inherently understand the value of the insurance agent. We inherently understand the value of the guy that fixes your car. I'm saying that because I had a wreck last week, so it's on my mind. But you know, I think it's harder for the general public, just like with a museum. They know that it's bad if the museum goes away, but I guarantee you they could not tell you why it's important for the museum to be there. And so I think that's the space that we're trying to gently, but also confidently stride into, is that, you know, this is a space where all of us belong, because all of us are in this, you know, sphere of identity of Monroe. Like you said it last week, we're searching. And so I think that's the cool thing, is that we're able to build it as we go.
I had the benefit of living outside looking in for a while.
Right.
I was here for a long time, moved away and came back. God opened the door for me to come back. But I looked at this community and I saw a community that really was apathetic about itself. And I saw a community that was so wonderful. And so when I got back, I said, every day that I get up and I go to a meeting, or if we have a dinner or luncheon, whatever it is, I'm going to remind people of just how wonderful this community is. And I start everything I start. It's a beautiful day in Monroe, West Monroe, Washita Parish. And now I have people coming up. They might not remember the exact.
Now we say it.
Yeah, they come up and say, boy, it's a wonderful day. It's a great day. It's whatever. But people, I think, here, our arts community, but just the general community as a whole, needed an opportunity for someone to say, it's okay to celebrate ourselves.
You made a comment where you said they're hungry. They're like clamoring for this type of conversation. And I think that's why what they're doing is so successful. And that's why when the city steps in the way that it has, which is a very, you know, deeply individually engaged level, we're all alums of a local university. We either moved back or stayed or whatever because we care so much about this little area of zip codes. I think that's when you made that comment, I thought like we can't even do it fast enough. Like that's the sense of urgency. It's like I can't even meet the need because there is so much ask and demand.
But every time we reach out to our businesses, every time we ask for something in this community, almost always the generalized response is going to be, well, I didn't know we could do
Yes,
that.
yes,
We'd love to fill that need. We didn't know we could
That's
get
right.
involved in whatever the city is doing. So it's a different time.
When, and I don't, the two things, Chris and I, when I first came back to town, Chris and I had dinner with Senator Bill Cassidy. And I asked him about North Louisiana.
Oh, yeah.
And Senator Cassidy said he thought for a very long period of time, and he said, well, Ruston has their act together. Well, I thought, well, I'm the Monroe Chamber and Chris is the West Monroe Chamber, and you're talking about Ruston. But anyway, he said, you guys there wasn't collaboration. And now with Mayor Mitchell and Mayor Ellis and others, there's this collaboration. So he said, things are changing. Well, fast forward to 3 weeks ago, when the Southern Rail Commission was here and Senator Cassidy was here, he went on about our community and the collaboration and the great things going on in our community for 30 minutes. He stood up there and said, this thing, I can't tell you how great things are happening. Well, that didn't happen by accident. That happened because of the collaboration that's going on. We had Governor Edwards here 3 weeks ago as well, that same week. He's not up for re-election. At the end of his speech, he got up and said, before I leave office, I want to come back. He said, what's happening in this community is transformative. And it is. Everywhere you look, whether it's in West Monroe or Monroe, things are happening here that is so exciting, and people are beginning to we're getting our swagger back.
And I think it's, I know we've been talking for a long time, Jessica, I'm sorry, but there's a phrase that my grandparents used to say to me a lot, and it comes from scripture, and it says comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that for 20 to 40 years, so 2 to 4 decades, we looked around and all we did was compare and contrast, and we were left without joy. And so I think lately, and it's like a baby, mindset. It has not fully matured yet. So I hope anybody that watches this, God bless you. We're not saying that we have it all figured out, because we do not. But there is that first little blooming of hope and of optimism. And so I think we stopped comparing. And so we're looking not inward in a bad way, but we're looking inward to say, what do we have? And that was something I'd written down from our conversation last week, of like looking at the landscape that already exists, again, back to the tactical aspect of this, and then figuring out where to integrate some of this stuff. I mean, that's the biggest, to me, drawback whenever you do approach, especially the business community. I'm going to tease them a little bit. I'm not adding any new work to their workflow. That's something like, as an artist and as a creative, we do have to be cognizant of that. We love that. Like, we love, process and, noodling around, and maybe it doesn't come to fruition, and then we back off and we go this way and yada, yada. That stresses them out usually, not to stereotype all of them, but typically it does. And so what I have found is that if we already, first of all, cultural asset map, y'all know I love that. Survey your landscape. What are you already doing well? What are you not doing well? Who have you not talked to in a while? Even if something's been happening for 15 years, if it's great and people still love it and support it, like the gallery crawl that he mentioned, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. People love it. And they think a group of like 60 individuals throws that event, and it's like 6. Okay. And it's because it's gotten such big community buy-in. Okay. Well, that's great. We're already doing that really well. So how can we make some of this stuff happen there? Yes. How can we have Uncle Roy come in and talk to them about good business practices? How can Chris come in and talk to them about operating a venue, how to pay your freaking taxes? You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of areas where like the chambers can be pulled into some of that.
And it's something as simple
to
as
formalize
writing a contract.
Yes.
Like artists are always looking for skills that they don't necessarily have.
That's right.
Something like writing a simple contract for a sale of goods.
That's right.
Or a provider of services, or paying your taxes, right? That was
right.
Really. Those are all skills. That's in our wheel.
Right. And I think that that's some of the stuff that, now that we do have these relationships in place, and we are, very trustful of each other and love each other, is like, how can we create some of those opportunities for growth where previously we would have had to probably brought somebody in from out of town to do those kinds of things,
So one of the things I've really been enjoying about this conversation is hearing you all talk about the trust that you have. And I know that you mentioned the mural project, and that there was somewhat of an artistic process in the administration of these different projects. And I wanted to know, moving in that way with individuals that you have trust with is possible, but what do you do when you don't have the trust yet to move with a kind of artistic process? And I'm wondering, in this last kind of question conversation of ours, what advice can you give to other arts leaders who are looking to build the kind of trust that you all have?
I think for me, coming from, a more purely artistic focused background back into more of a pretty legacy oriented, municipal government structure. For me, it's just being able to hold space for the tension that open-ended processes can cause. Did I say that with enough jargon? I think it's just understanding that a no is not always a no, and sometimes it is. But typically a no is lack of comprehension of where I'm trying to get, which really just pushes me to try and figure out how can I work backwards to where I am now. And also I think like bringing them in on the things that I'm doing so that there's this bigger perspective and it's not just like, oh, here's crazy Kelsey trying to do something again. Why is the city doing this? And then I can be like, oh, well, this is like, the chambers and the city and the university and, blah, 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 all coming together to do this thing. And then they're like, okay, well, there's like more groundswell, I think. But I think for me specifically as a person, it's understanding like where to push, where to back off, how to hold that tension. But then also me as like a concept, I would say it's probably to take the time for the relationships.
Well, and then just and mapping where that person is in their background.
Yeah.
So knowing how to actively include them. So hey, I'm more of a logistics, get it done kind of person.
Right.
Roy has a beautiful ability to get people in the room that don't really want to start talking.
That's right.
Talking.
Yeah.
And so,
we kind of like, we're like the facets of this,
So, but it's because it starts with, tell us where you came from to get to this conversation today, and honoring where they are. And then the thing that I've learned more in the last year and a half is just give someone a compliment every once in a while and honor the thing that they have.
Tell them they're doing a great job. Yeah, that's
just
right.
Say, you know what? That was a really awesome contribution. Thank you for making that. That made me think about something differently.
That's right.
It's a very small thing that goes really, really far, especially when you're asking for something and have
goes back to the hungriness of our general community to know that like they're going somewhere and that they're doing good work
and they want to be included.
Yeah.
And I think that's universal.
Yeah.
But people want to be included. They want to be honored. You don't necessarily have to put their name on something as a legacy. That's a whole different thing. But at least know where they're coming from when they come to the table.
And I think what they both said is perfect and beautiful. And I will sum that up with one word, which is respect. And I think if we all come to the table respecting each other, you're not going to build a great relationship overnight. It takes time and there will be setbacks. We've had our setbacks, but we keep moving forward with respect of what Chris said, understanding where their people are coming from and what they're bringing to the table and seeing how we can find commonalities in that to move us all forward. And through action is how they'll gain trust with us.
And wrapping that all the way back around to the very first question, you talked about what happens if we go away. I think that's where the vision is larger than my individual opinion, right? And so that way, if I do, move on to something else or move laterally or whatever happens to any of us, that vision is set enough to where it's driving.
I think it's almost important for us to be thinking with not, oh no, I'm here for the long run.
Yeah.
It's more, I'm here until I pass the baton and someone else can continue it. And the only thing that would be a
sense of urgency.
The only thing that would be a failure is not moving the conversation forward.
That's right.
All the in between steps where you have the minutia of
that's right.
what feels like a failure in the past year, which is humbling. And Roy has taught me so much in the sense that he starts and says, it's a good thing. It's positive. It's a great day. And so once you break the mindset of, damn, we got to overcome that pain in the ass permit from the city to get the event. What a great opportunity to talk with the city about streamlining their processes.
That's
what a
right.
Great opportunity,
that's right.
To have a conversation that never happened before. It's pretty cool. I I've never done a job that used my brain the way that this job does.
Yeah.
Um,
Or honestly, I know we're wrapping up, but one that allows us to actually do the things that we want to see happen.
Yeah.
Where I can say, it is non-negotiable that the Arts Council is involved in this. It is non-negotiable that the chamber is involved in this arts process. It is non-negotiable, that we attend this event at the museum. I mean, that's been the cool thing is to be able to do this and also see it affect change.
Yes.
I think that's the crazy thing is because again, I still don't expect it to have the outcomes that it has. And then it's been amazing. It's been pretty crazy, but also
And just
amazing.
be open.
That's right.
Open to all the
Right.
cool and diverse things that
Yeah.
come to the table when you do all the things that we've talked about.
That's right.
And be open and just
It's
see
such a
where it goes.
surprise.
It's just so exciting to see
Yeah.
where it's going.
Thank you all so much. It's such a wonderful note to leave this session on of kindness and hope and respect. So thank you all. I really appreciate your insight and just being able to see you all together and communicating together in the way that the relationship exists is a really beautiful thing. So thank you again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
As a reminder, this is the first session of How to Partner with Your Chamber of Commerce, Part 3. As part of this package, there are 2 additional pre-recorded sessions, a digital toolkit to accompany this content as well. Parts 1 and 2 are available on ArcU, and each also includes 3 on-demand sessions and a toolkit. You can also find the toolkits on the Partnership Movement at partnershipmovement.org. Many thanks again to Kelsey, Roy, and Chris, and to the City of Monroe, and to your communities. Yeah, high fives all around. And thank you so much to our community for listening to this series. Take care. Thank you.